Well, good day, class. Here we are. Let's talk about part two for The Way of the Champion. Dr. Jerry Lynch's work in an attempt to take the tenets of The Art of War by General Sun Tzu and give it a little bit of a Western perspective. He hasn't changed any of the dynamics or the basic philosophy or tenets of General Sun Tzu, but he does flesh it out a little bit with Western concepts and probably makes it a little bit more the art of war a little bit more approachable, at least at the outset. As you get better, should you decide to embrace some of these some of this philosophy, you're going to find that it's going to provide more and more and more and more insights. So remember, this is nothing uh, out of your reach. You can do this, but it will take some application, and it's going to take some time to break into it because it's a very different way of looking at things. So let's get into the second part, uh, examining the last two of the four tenets. All right, let's talk about the way of competitive advantage, and I think we'd all like to have a piece of that action. And that's broken down, sub-referenced into lessons on embracing adversity, lessons on champion virtues. Notice it's virtues, not values. Virtues are far more deeply held and longer lived. And then lessons on opposites, which, well, I'll make some commentary on that when we get into it, shall we? Let's get into embracing adversity. Um, a little side note, you need to again reflect that most of us would like to think that everybody thinks the way that we do, but that's not true. And it's especially true if you're an athlete. And here, everyone that I'm speaking to, you're all kinesiology majors and all exercise physiologists. So you are athletes and you're interested in athletics and competition, et cetera, et cetera. But above all, you're risk takers. So you're willing to put yourself in the arena. You're willing to put the cards on the table and put yourself, quote, in harm's way, unquote. Now, I'm not talking about in physical harm's way necessarily. I'm talking about just out there where you might look foolish, you might lose, you might be embarrassed, whatever. You're willing to do that in the name of the competition because the destination is far greater than uh, uh, the journey is far greater than the destination. Pardon me. Good grief. Getting my words caught up here. So let's talk about plateau power. Remember what we were talking about before, where to the uninitiated, if you enter the gym and you start to, quote, work out, you think that you're going to make steady gains. When that's just not the case. Most of the time, you're going to have a little bit of a gain, and then you're going to sit on a plateau. And then you're going to get a little bit of a gain and sit on a plateau. And then maybe you're going to lay off for a little while and you're going to degrade, and then you're going to come back and you go up a little bit again, and then you get on a plateau. The point to be made here is that majority of the time is spent on the plateau. And if you want to look at that from a perspective of destination versus journey, we're talking about the majority of the time you spend on the journey. You don't spend at the destination sitting back with a mint julep. So, plateau power, logical and natural consequence. Yeah. Here he's talking to any attainments or any achievements that you make. Remember, this is a goal-less journey, so we're not necessarily going after something as a goal. We're engaged in self-improvement, and anything that we do to improve ourselves is naturally going to improve ourselves anywhere that we go. So you're going to see some subtle but significant changes and some improvements along the way. But these are logical and natural consequences of you engaging in self-improvement. The plateau, you have the opportunity to refine. Here, you're constantly, diligently working. Once again, to quote Master Musashi from the Book of Five Rings, one of the words that resonates throughout his entire Book of Five Rings is practice. Practice, practice, practice. You must practice this diligently. Practice, according to Master Musashi, practice is the shortcut. Practice is the shortcut. You try to get off of that tangent and you try to take a shortcut, you're going to find yourself not just back where you started, you're going to find yourself significantly behind, especially relative to your competition, because they're going to continue on and you're going to come back, and you'd like to think that you intercept right back where you left off, but no, you don't, because you haven't been doing what was necessary and it puts you back. So you have to work diligently to get back to the point at which you got off track. So, and this concept of next level, the next level is a two-dimensional concept. It's what we were talking about in the first part of the semester, where everybody thinks in terms of getting to the next level. Well, that's just A to B. And once you get up there, then take a deep breath and catch your breath, and then you try to take it to the next level. Well, here in this second half of the semester, we're dealing with self-improvement, and self-improvement is a three-dimensional. It has a z-axis. You got the x, the y, and a z. So really, everything that you do in your pursuit of Kaizen is improving the size of the sphere. Think of it like skin of an onion. You're adding another layer and another layer and another layer. So you're growing in three dimensions rather than just going up onto another ledge. So, challenging work. This is embracing adversity. Challenging work. What is it Henry Ford said? Most people don't recognize opportunity because it comes dressed as work clothes. So, strong work ethic. Well, I can't. I just can't say enough about this. It just depends upon how much is enough for you. How much how much do you regard as being too much and how much is insufficient? But your strong work ethic is going to be something that you are known for. And I've talked to you about this before. You are already known for certain things. Remember the things that you bring to the group and bring to your family, and the role and the position that you hold in each of these groups. Your strong work ethic is something that you can be known for. It's not necessarily something that is some esoteric concept. You can work to develop and learn how to do this. And at least from my perspective, it's always best to be known as the go-to person rather than be known for something somewhat undesirable. And how much does it have to be? Well, Dr. Lynch says it just needs to be more than the other guy. Just a little bit more. And I get asked about this from time to time. How good do you have to be to prevail? Well, in sports, generally all it takes is one. In golf, after 72 holes of golf, all it takes is one. In other words, you touch the ball one more time than I did, and I win. In 100 meters, in a race, you don't have to blow someone away by 10 lengths. No, all you have to be is a little bit more than the other guy. So, bing, you cross the line 1/100th of a second faster than your next competitor, and you win, and he does not. So, this challenging work, it tends to allow you a different perspective on things, but it's up to you to determine how much is sufficient and how much is excessive. And you can explore that unto yourself through your journal. And I suggest that you do that. Well, the pain of holding back is another way of embracing adversity. This is interesting. Playing to win versus playing not to lose. These are two very different tactics and strategies. I remember talking to one of my PGA players years and years ago. He still is known as a very aggressive player. If not aggressive, maybe assertive. He goes out and he, quote, attacks the course. He takes risks. I mean, he'll smack the ball 200 meters across water to kind of save a shot and to set himself up. And anyway, he's known as being a very, very assertive, play to win kind of guy. Well, he was at a major, and he had 3 holes left, and he had a 2-stroke lead. And he told me later on that he made the conscious decision to hold back. To just, okay, well, look, all I need to do is just set myself up, no risks, just play it nice and easy, set myself, then make par, and I'll go in and win my big major here. Well, I think you can guess where this is going. He put 2 in the water back to back, and ultimately, I'll cut to the chase, he lost by 2 strokes. He lost by 2 strokes. Um, and although we laugh about it now, at the time it wasn't that funny. But it was his conscious decision to play a game that he knew nothing about. His game was the reason he was in the position to win was because he was assertive, because that was what he knew, and that's the game that he knew, and that was what he spoke fluently. Holding back, playing it safe, being cautious, he didn't know how to do that, and as a consequence, he was playing a game he didn't understand. Had he maintained his attitude and gone for the jugular and he probably would have won by 3 strokes, but that's neither here nor there. So that's something for you coaches and trainers. Uh, you might want to explore with your athletes if they're having trouble. Are they playing? Are they out there playing to win, or are they playing not to lose? It's a very different type thing. Winners and champions play to win. Uh, People who are risk averse play not to lose because they don't want to get embarrassed. The pain of holding back is settling for less than, yeah, the woulda, coulda, shoulda stuff, and this is where we get haunted by hindsight being 2020. Don't be too caught up in that, or don't get too caught up in that. However, keep in mind that in any engagement, you never lose. You either win or you learn. So you're taking something away, and you're going to process it either individually or as a team, and certainly within yourself, and using your journal as the guide for that, and using it as an instrument of your own betterment. And then the success of failure. Well, guys, this can best be explained. Um, which do you learn more from? And be very honest here. Which do you learn more from, your successes or your failures? Well, it all has to do, if you remember back to the first lecture that I gave you, which was expectations and outcomes. If you've got a history of positive results and success, you expect to win. And when you win, you expected to win, and you did. And okay, there may be some satisfaction, but there's no high fives, and you're not running around, you're not explosive, you're not elated. No, it's just, yeah, I meant to do that, and I did it. However, if you still have that history and those expectations of victory and success, and you get your backside handed to you, that's going to keep you awake looking at the ceiling fan at 3 in the morning. So you learn a great deal more from your failures, and most athletes will recognize that. I told you before that in my practice, um, relative to successes and failures, or strengths and weaknesses is really where I want to go with this. My athletes are far more willing to talk about their weaknesses than they are their strengths. Why? Well, because they realize that they're big fish in a real small pond, and that all the other big fish in that pond have exactly the same talents that they've got. They're not concerned about that. That's just a ticket to ride. That's just the gate fee. It's their weaknesses that determine whether you're going to stay there and remain competitive. So, the success of failure, a high tolerance for setbacks. Every time I give this lecture, I think about Babe Ruth. Yes, he was a home run king. Yes, held the world record for home runs, but he also held another record for strikeouts, which means that he was willing, talking about a risk taker, he was willing to get in there and go down swinging. And every pitcher knew that if you threw a ball, even within the arena of possibility, if he could get his bat on it, he would do it. He would swing at it, and probably if he connected, it was gone. So, making more mistakes, trying to learn more. That's exemplified by Babe Ruth. Yeah, he went down swinging. You didn't strike him out with him simply standing there. He was going to cut at it, and he was going to cut viciously. And if he connected, it was probably going to count. And then here's that final distinction between being a winner and being a champion. Winners win once in a while. Winners are occasionally celebrated. Champions, however, win in every engagement because they always take something valuable from the engagement. All right, a little bit more on embracing adversity. The danger of success. Yeah, there is the inevitability of decline, if for no other reason, aging. Especially when we're talking about athletes and athletics at such a high level. I don't care how great shape you're in. There, when you hit 30, there's going to be some 20-year-old behind you with some skills that are developing while yours are maintaining. See, so there's going to be that. This concept of identity, and we've talked about this before in the previous lecture, is utility to interest to importance to identity. Once your respective sport or whatever you engage in becomes your identity, anything that reduces it, anything that threatens that identity, threatens the way that the world relates to you, and you allow the world to, you allow yourself to relate to the world. And remember that all glory is fleeting. That even world records were made to be challenged and were made to be broken. The fatigue intrigue. I don't know whether you're being introduced to this in your exercise phys classes or not, but you should be, because there's a lot of work being done and research as to what actually constitutes fatigue. Is there a mental, is there an emotional component, is there a spiritual component? Is it simply buildup of lactic acid? Is it simply enzymatic deficiency? What is it? We don't know. Well, we do know. We know a lot of components, so we don't know the cause of fatigue necessarily, but we do know some of the contributors, plural, to that. And remember that fatigue, it's universal. If you're out there and you're competing and you're dragging ass, understand that your competitor over there is dragging ass too. So you need to suck it up. Suck it up and continue on, carry on. Uh, Dr. Lynch says you don't fight it, you cooperate. And how do you cooperate? Well, the first thing you can do as a coach or a trainer is expose your peeps to this in your pick two, your practice, conditioning, training, and working out. You expose them to this before you hit the field of contest. And in doing so, you can gradually shape them, because they're going to think that it can be possible to turn it on and turn it off, but you want to dispel that myth. It's not turning it on and turning it off. It's a rheostat. It's a dimmer switch. You turn it up and you turn it down. You don't want it to be an on-off switch, because then it becomes almost an all or nothing. So you turn it up when it's necessary. You turn it down when it's necessary, and thereby you conserve those valuable but limited finite resources like time and energy. And the spheres of fatigue, and I just mentioned those: the mental, the physical, the spiritual. There are different ways, and keep that in mind for the next lecture, or the lecture on performance spheres that's coming up in a week or so. Anyway, injury is meditation. Anybody who has been injured, and if you go through the hierarchy, we're not talking about discomfort. All of us have been in discomfort. If you work out, if you're an athlete, there's a portion of your anatomy all the time is in discomfort, all of the time. And if it's not, shame on you, then you should be. You need to get back in the gym. You need to start working out again. But there's discomfort, and then there's hurt. Or next, there's pain next. And all of us experience pain. Put your hand up. You ever played in discomfort? Yeah. You ever played in pain? Yeah, you have that too. Well, let's take it up a notch. Beyond that, there's hurt. Here's a question. Have you ever played hurt? Yeah, yeah. I see your hands going up a little. Yeah, you have to admit it. Okay. How many of us, because I'm going to include myself here, have been real dumbass and played injured? Yeah. Now, once again, just to reflect back, I told you that we'd like to think that everybody thinks the way that we do. This is a great defining separator of athletes from muggles and non-athletic folk. Athletes, to them, we have a fine and comprehensive understanding of the difference and the gradations of discomfort, pain, hurt, and injury. But here, Dr. Lynch is saying injury is meditation. And anybody who's been injured, I'm talking about taken out of the gym, taken off of the field, taken off of the track. That is meditation. You are forced to spend a lot of time with you. Now, what do you talk about? How do you talk about it? Well, this is where the journal comes in once again, and you knew that I was going to get a shameless plug in there for that. But anyway, it gives you affords you the ability to reflect upon your effects on your life. And here again, you get utility through identity. If it's utilitarian and you get injured, it's no big deal. Go do something else. However, if it gets up to interest and importance, now it's going to have much more consequential impact. If it gets to identity, it can be devastating if injury takes place. All right, enough on embracing adversity. Let's talk about some of these champion virtues. I think it's interesting that he leads off with modesty. That's the number one, that's the most important virtue. And if you ever want an extraordinary treatise on virtues, I highly recommend Dr. Bill Bennett's The Book of Virtues. He didn't write the book; he compiled it. He's the editor, so he brought everyone together. He was the one who brought all these disparate, uh, uh, everything from little poems to short stories to myths to legends uh, to just any kind of literature that reflects some of these virtues. And he does an extraordinary job on it. Dr. Bill Bennett, Bennett, and it's The Book of Virtues. Anyway, get back to modesty. Centered within versus centered around. Interesting that he brings this up because in psychology, we know that centered people are generally extraordinary people. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be beneficial or anything positive. But within this centeredness, these core values and virtues, there are people that are centered within themselves, and there are people that are centered around themselves. Let's deal with the former. People who are centered within themselves are at peace. They're satisfied. They're content. Well, they're content, but they're really not satisfied because they're always continually striving. Remember, they are in the pursuit of mastery, which you're never going to attain. So the journey continues, but there again, the journey is the point of the entire exercise. These people uh, don't need to make anyone else look bad. Uh, they are at peace. They have a certain peace within them, and they attract others around them. Um, Now, people who are centered within themselves express childlike qualities, and these are endearing qualities like wonder and enchantment and joy and harmony and rapture and fascination, those sorts of things. Contrasted with this, we have people that are centered around themselves. Now, we have a different word for them in psychology. We call them egocentric. These people are centered around themselves. In other words, the world revolves around them, and anything that happens is a personal affront to them. They exude childish qualities. These are non-endearing qualities. These are all of the pain in the backside type things that we don't necessarily embrace with children, and these are spoiled and being vain and tantrums and selfishness and these sorts of things. So childlike versus childish, and he suggests, of course, that you might want to consider modesty, which is childlike. Persistence, gosh, guys, how many times have we seen this in every one of the lectures that we've talked about? Remember, it's come in different forms. Sometimes we call it discipline, sometimes commitment, sometimes perseverance, sometimes persistence, sometimes stick-to-itiveness, sometimes lifelong journey. Anyway, it's time on task. Time on task. Stay the course. Keep going. Get knocked down 5, get up 6. That kind of thing. And I put time on task and DF here. That's with our exercise prescription modalities. Duration and frequency. Duration and frequency are time elements. Persistence. Duration. How long are you going to do it? Frequency. How often? And remember that this all feeds into the cumulative and summative effect over time that persistence will have. Remember that the temptation to quit will be greatest just before you're ready to succeed. I hope that haunts you. Okay, compassion and courage. Oh boy. Gee. It's permission to be human is what he talks about. But anyway, courage is coming back for more. And I often get asked about the difference. Is there a difference between courage and bravery? Yes, there is. In order to be brave, you have to have an underlying base of courage. Bravery is an action. Bravery is is a behavior. Courage is the underlying emotion or virtue that permits bravery to be exposed or to be expressed. So it's the ability to come back for more, despite whatever has come going on. I'm reminded of Rudyard Kipling's "If." If you can keep your head while those about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. Wow. What an amazing treatise on courage and compassion. And the difference between sympathy and empathy. Most of us can be sympathetic. You look at somebody in their situation, circumstance, you go, "Wow, man, bitch being you, pal." But to express empathy is to insert yourself and immerse yourself in the other person's world and feel and try to see things through their eyes. Very, very much more difficult, very much more of a committed type of experience. And then belief. He talks here, because we all have finite resources, we all have limited time and energy, that you need to attend to things within your control. Remember the serenity prayer. Let me attend to things that I can change, and let me leave things that I cannot change alone, and grant me the courage and wisdom to know the difference between the two. And this concept of leading the body and leading the mind. I think we talked about this briefly in a former lecture, but let me just tell you what this is. There are two schools of thought. One says lead the body and the mind will follow. The other says lead the mind and the body will follow. Uh, Most of us here in the West lead the body and the mind will follow. In other words, just get in the damn gym, get up off the couch and do something. And then you're going to find that you're seeing results. And then, okay, now you're convinced. And this adds momentum and inertia to the journey itself. Leading the body and the mind will follow is better said, when you see it, then you'll believe it. If you lead the mind and the body will follow, you say, when you believe it, then you will see it. So two different um, philosophies in psychobiology or physiological psych, which is kind of the realm in which I work. Well, what else do we have? Well, let's talk about yielding. Yielding is not opposing things all the time. You don't have to be like a salmon swimming upstream. You can be like water. You can adapt. You can improvise, adapt, and overcome. You can adapt to your surroundings. You don't have to be oppositional. Because what he's saying here is that if you remain oppositional all the time, you only have those limited resources and you're going to be exhausted. They're going to be exhausted. They're going to be used up and you won't have anything. You go to the cupboard and it's going to be bare. So, yielding has power over time. It's creative, it's adaptable, it's resilient, and it's the strength. It's a different type of strength, the strength of an oak tree versus bamboo. Well, you might say, which is stronger? Well, standing there just standing there in still air, an oak tree is very, very strong. However, in a strong wind, the oak tree may be blown over, whereas the bamboo is yielding. It will bend and bend and bend and bend until the wind subsides, and then it will come right back. Well, fortitude is quiet strength and confidence. It's the ability to be resilient and have persistence and dedication and commitment and discipline. It's that stubborn trust and faith to be able to get back up again, regardless of how many times you get knocked on your ass. So, fortitude is a very, very powerful thing. You can learn to have these qualities, these virtues. Sacrifice. Well, sacrifice means different things to different people at different times. Now, I didn't mean that to be purposefully confusing, but sometimes sacrifice can be just something where you pull yourself out of your comfort zone. But it is the process of constantly challenging yourself, not being content. I remember my master told me years and years ago, he said, instructor Fisher, be content but never be satisfied. I always thought that was a very insightful type of comment, especially to a man to whom English was not his first language, not his primary language. And the subtle distinctions I've learned to live with that. Be content. In other words, be proud of what you've done, but don't be satisfied because you have miles to go before you sleep. You've got a lot of other things to do. So, and sacrifice always involves investment. With investment of what? Well, the ones that we've been talking about for the entirety of this course is time and energy. Those are the two currencies that we usually work with in any competition. or in any contest. Time and energy. How you allocate time and energy is entirely up to you, but we're going to see the wisdom of your allocation on the playing field. And then respect. Yeah, RESPECT. It's earned, not simply given. In the military, we have, any of you veterans, you understand this. There's a saying that there are two types of officers. There are officers that demand respect, and there are officers that command respect. And those who demand respect rarely get it, nor do they ever deserve it. Really, they just sit around and demand it. They don't respect anybody else, and yet they require everybody else to demand. They demand that everybody else respect them. As far as those who command respect, when they walk into the room, there's no doubt in anybody's ever loving mind who's in charge. And boom, that's command right there. And I hope you're reading between the lines here and substituting parenthetical leadership. A lot of the people that we see in politics today, they claim to be our leaders. No, you guys aren't leaders at all. And take a look at what you've done. Look where you're leading us. But beyond that, you're representatives. You're not leaders. Remember, we already talked about this. How do you know who the leaders are in your team? It may or may not be the person wearing the armband. But if you encounter a situation where the stuff hits the fan, take a look at to whom all heads turn. That is going to be your leader. And this respect, he says that you need to respect yourself. And in order to respect yourself, you got to get to know yourself. And in order to get to know yourself is going to require some examination. And there's that examined life again. Only then can you truly respect others. All right, enough on the virtues here. Let's get into lessons on opposites. Slower is faster. Yeah. Beware of quick fixes and pay attention. Sometimes slow is fast. There's an expression in the military too. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You practice things so that they flow. You're working on the flow and the transition of one thing to the next. So slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So slower is faster. Sometimes people, as a matter of fact, do you know anybody who moves at a frenetic pace all the time and constantly runs into a wall? And usually it's the same wall, time after time after time after time. You think they learn after a while, but no, sadly. And not doing is doing. Sometimes not doing something is a decision. Sometimes not doing something is a course of action. I'm always reminded of, and this happens all the time out at the university, where in committees you get somebody who finally says, "Look, we've got to do something." Whoa, Sparky! Hey, no, you don't. Old expression says that if you're at the bottom of a hole and you want to get out, put down the shovel and stop digging. Don't do something in the name of simply doing something. You might exacerbate or make the situation significantly worse. So be very, very careful of, we've got to do something, because that's meaningless. It's a spacious argument. Oh yeah, what about this? Rest is an ally. Now, I hope in your exercise phys classes this is a topic of research, because it's a huge topic of research in the body of investigation. Rest, we don't know the specifics about rest. We don't know the individual idiosyncratic necessity of rest. In other words, how long does it take to actually recoup relative to slow twitch and fast twitch muscles? How long does it take for enzymes to replenish? How long does it take for ATP to for AMP to become ADP to become ATP? How long does phosphorylation occur? How much time does it take to recover? So that's where rest is an ally. Sometimes, and coaches, Neanderthal coaches especially, and no disrespect intended, but they think that if you're not in the gym or you're not out hammering out on the field, then you're not doing anything. No, sometimes you need to come inside and sit and watch game films and talk things out and plan with the X's and O's, etc. Okay, little is large. Yeah, devil in the details, sweat the small stuff. Little things, little streams become large rivers. And the whole concept of Kaizen, I don't want to get too much into that, but you can see that little things do sweat the small stuff. Do sweat the small stuff, because small stuff unattended does have a cumulative and summative effect, and it can become big stuff real fast. Opponents are partners. You need to learn from each other. Even even opponents out on the field at the track of the pitch, learn something from their performance. Remember, you either win or you learn, so you take something away, not just your own performance, but their performance too, and perhaps your reaction to it or what you did and their reaction to it. Uh, uh, I spur each other to more. I've often every time I give this lecture, I think about being a naval aviator. Um, I'm, I was a pretty good pilot, but I'll tell you, I was around some straight razors. I was around some amazing pilots, just some incredible pilots, and we spurred each other on because every flight that you had, all of your landings were graded, and you were constantly on your toes. So you had never mind I had to work my butt off just to maintain, just to keep pace with these guys. Um, it was a great experience, and I got to say, I really miss it. But anyway, be a worthy opponent is what he says, and you're going to see that come up over and over and over again. Okay, finally on the lessons of opposites, soft is strong, bamboo and oak. We've already talked about that. Resilience is the ability to not be oppositional all the time. I'm always amused when I go to the beach, or go over to Coco or Patrick or wherever, and see people get hit by the waves, and they're from out of town, and you see them get hit, and they get knocked on their can, and they get up, and they get hit by another one, they get knocked down, and then you can see the wheels turning in their head, and they think, hey, wait a minute, what if I turn sideways and establish some kind of a hydrodynamic foil here so that it'll go and they get knocked on their butt again, but they don't understand that they're trying to fight the something that is inexhaustible. The sea is always going to win, kind of like when you work out on a heavy bag. Heavy bag is always going to win. So, effort is effortless. Blend rather than resist. This again speaks to the conservation of the finite resources that you have. Once again, time and energy. Inside is outside. Oh boy. Just to begin to explore this, it has to do with chi. I'll cut to the chase on this and tell you that if you're interested in this and you really have any questions about this, contact me through email and I'll give you some resources and whatnot. But just to go into this would exceed the scope of, never mind this lecture, it would exceed the scope of the course. So anyway, it's the interplay between internal and external energies and chi. And then a little bit of confusing, clever language here. Body thinking and mind dancing. Obviously, there's a juxtaposition there. You'd think that body dancing and mind thinking, but no, there is no difference, is the illustrating concept here, illustrated concept. Integration of the spheres. Put an asterisk next to that. When we get into performance spheres, we're going to talk about that. And what we're talking about here is engaging in practice, conditioning, training, and working out so that your people, your team, can take what now takes conscious effort, which really consumes most of your working memory. You're going to practice and practice and practice and practice to the point where conscious moves down to subconscious, and eventually it moves down to unconscious. Now, don't roll your eyes. Don't roll your eyes, because you've already done this. Each and every one of you has already done this. Matter of fact, you might have done it today. We like to think that this is something that requires you to go up on a mountaintop and sit for 20 years in a lotus position, eating lotus blossoms. No. Think about driving a car. You're piloting a 1.5 ton, 2-ton missile through the streets of Orlando at untold speeds, trying to keep it between the dotteds. But everything that you do, think about when you first got behind the wheel for the very first time. You're confronted with levers and buttons and switches and pedals and mirrors and dials and gauges. Well, it took everything you could do just to start the thing. You had to buckle the seatbelt and then adjust the mirrors. And then, if you were like me, I learned on a standard, so I had to depress the clutch, which I often forgot to do. And then I'd start it in gear and have to start the whole thing over again. Now, what do? Well, you've taken all that stuff and you chunked it together, and it's become subconscious at the very least. And a lot of it, I've been driving now for 50 plus years. And so for me, most of what I do is unconscious. It has to be. I'm thinking about 1,000 other things. And let me illustrate that to you, just to give you a couple of concrete examples before we move into the last part of this lecture. Have you ever driven all the way across town and just arrived and don't even know how you got there? I'll tell you this. Have you ever driven past your exit? Have you ever taken the wrong exit because you're so used to it? It's just the way that you've always gone, and you weren't even really thinking. In the car, it's almost like the car drove you that way. So anyway, don't think that this is something that is unlearned. You can do this, and you can learn how to transition things from conscious to subconscious, and eventually down to the unconscious. Guys, this explains why an expert. This explains why an expert will almost always defeat a novice because the novice is consumed with just not only just the basics of what he or she is trying to do, but also the novelty of the situations being introduced. So interesting. All right, enough of that. Let's get into team unity and leadership. I'm not going to spend too much on team unity. I'm just going to leave you to your own devices here because a lot of this stuff, I suggest you get into his book and you can see some of the exercises, a lot of this. But leadership is huge, so we will take a little look at that. Team harmony, yeah, spirit of connectedness and unity. It's a Gestalt. A Gestalt is a German word, means this. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, any of you who cook, every time I give this lecture, I think about cooking. If you take a bunch of ingredients, you take some basil and you take some pine nuts and you take some Parmesan cheese and you take some salt and a little bit of olive oil, and you take all of those things. Each one is pretty good in its own, but when you put it together and you make a pesto sauce, that's insane. It's insane. It's just, it takes it to an entirely different level. So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And this applies to teams, it applies to individuals, it applies to a great many things. It's just an interesting way to view the world. Geese in flight, this is conservation and contribution and taking turns shouldering the burden of leadership. And if you notice, Dr. Lynch talks about geese in flight. If you notice, if you've ever seen geese in flight, it's always a V. And he said just a V for victory. But really what's happening, if you would understand aerodynamics, and I used to teach aerodynamics in the Navy, but aerodynamics, the lead goose at the apex of the V is the one doing the majority of the work. Everybody else, all the other geese, are drafting off of that first goose, and they're all talking to each other. Yeah, you're the goose, you're the goose, and they're working and working and working, and then just periodically, that goose will go all the way back to the back and assume place where you're getting the best draft off of everybody so that he or she can recover, and the next goose takes over and the whole thing repeats itself. As a consequence, with a V, geese can fly exponentially further in the V formation than they could if they were doing it on their own. Starting and stopping, yeah, the start and stop and continue. This is, I don't want to get into heaven and hell chopsticks necessarily. It'd be a lot more entertaining if we were in person here, but we got to get a move on. The stop, start, and continue. Every time I give this lecture, I think about when Title IX first came about, and female athletes were afforded scholarships, and it was primarily, it was primarily two sports, maybe three. It was softball, but volleyball and soccer, and there was a disproportionate number of ACL injuries. And what they found was that coaches were teaching athletes how to start. In other words, how to get off the line real quick, but they were not teaching them how to stop and change direction. And that's where ACL injuries occurred. So it was a kind of a gap in the coaching. It's really attended to right now, today, because of course we've got this evidence. But anyway, shared reflection. Yeah, pay attention to patterns in your life. Look at yourself and others that surround you. Yeah, there's a reason. Remember, this gets back to that group, whether it be in your family, for which you already occupy a certain zone, a certain role, a certain role, if you will. This is who you are, and this is what you bring to the table. But you also do this with your friends. And shared reflection. Yeah, it's a great use of time. It's time well spent to get to know what the qualities are that you do bring to the table. Here, I'm just going to leave this one, just going to blow through it. The team harmony, circle of appreciation, the greatest memory circle, power of the circle, and the champion team. get into the book, and you could probably touch on this on Dr. Lynch's website and The Way of the Champion. He offers some exercises and some team exercise, some things that you can do for team building. Um, do they work? Well, they do for Dr. Lynch. I've tried several of them, and it's been less than. But then again, I'm a very, very different type of person. I'm a results oriented guy, and I'm not exactly touchy feely. Dr. Lynch, on the other hand, is touchy feely. Bless his heart, but he has more success with this than I. So, if you're interested in that, get into it. They're all great. They all work, and he offers details as to how to initiate and how to complete them. Um, Here, as we close into the end, lessons on selflessness. It's surrendering self-interest. In other words, you're involved with something greater than you. It's tough to do this because we are all ego defended. It's tough for us to let go of this and voluntarily sacrifice all in the name of the group. But it can be built. In the military, we call it esprit de corps. Unit cohesion is another way of expressing that too, so that you not only care for yourself, but you care for the guy or the gal on either side of you, and that can be it can be a direct reflection of the um, how difficult your practice conditioning training and working out is. If it's nice and relaxed and easy, then there's really going to be very little chance for esprit de corps to develop. However, if you all are overcoming something significant, then there you go. Unconditional service. Remember that we're all in a service industry. The concept of being a samurai. Samurai means, the word means to serve. That's what it means. And samurai were servants. They were mercenaries, yes, but they were beholden to their warlord. And this is the concept of giving without mandate or reward. Again, a little bit more on selflessness. Playing second fiddle. I love this. Dr. Lynch says bench players also contribute. Yeah, yeah. Remember, I mean, look at our quarterback 2 years ago. Remember McKenzie, the quarterback behind him. McKenzie was the golden boy. Wow, he was going to go pro. He was probably be a contender for the Heisman, etc. And then that one hit took out his knee and took out his career. The point to be made here is the guy sitting on the bench immediately became frontline. You are now the quarterback. So while you're sitting there on the bench collecting splinters in your butt, you might want to be paying attention because you better be ready. Because all it takes is one play before you become the front line. You are the next in line. You've got to be there and you've got to fill the void. And that's the reason that you're sitting there in the first place. And then another one of the team exercises, the oneness of vision, the unified purpose, the winning cooperation. These are things that you can explore with your team because there are reasons, plural, outside just winning the championship or just having a winning season or just winning the game. There are other reasons, and you need to figure out what those are and discuss them and spend some time. That's one of those things you can do when you're not in the gym and you're not on the field, but you are spending time team building. And again, conscious leadership, just as a parting shot here, the art of choosing leaders. I always make the distinction between administrators, managers, and leaders. People ask me all the time, are leaders made or are they born? I tend to think the more and more that I'm around it, I tend to think that they're born. And if they don't lead up to a certain point, my answer to that is they were just never put in a position where they had to or needed to. Administrators, there's a big difference here. Let's say it's here. It's like a pendulum. On the far right is leadership. On the far left is administration. And in the middle is management. And as the pendulum swings, you can have managers that are more leader-oriented. And then you can have those that swing over where you can have managers that are much more administrators. Now, the point to be made with this, got to understand what's going on. Leaders are absolutely unique. Leaders have latitude. Leaders can take the initiative. They can mix their style in. They've got the ability to work within a parenthetical range. Administrators have no choice. Administrators administer policy and procedure. So if a situation occurs, they pull the policy and procedure manual off the shelf, they turn to the appropriate page, and they do exactly to the letter what the book says. They have no latitude. If they take some latitude or take the initiative, that's going to have their decision scrutinized, and they're going to be in trouble. So administrators are not leaders, not at all. And I love it in education, ed leadership. Their administration is supposed to be leader. No, they're not. They're pencil pushers, and they fill out forms, and they have endless meetings that accomplish little. Leaders, on the other hand, are the ones that you really want to emulate, and especially if you're going to be in the field of kinesiology and exercise science and exercise physiology as a coach, as a trainer, or as a medico. The guiding way, guiding through example rather than control. This is leadership by example, leading from the front lines. I've been in all kinds of different venues, guys. I've been in academia. I've been in the military. I've been in big corporation, small corporation, private practice. I've been in mom and pops. I've been in retail. I've been in food and beverage. I've been in the back of the house. I've done it all. I've done a lot of different things. And I have had the pleasure of working with and under some extraordinary leaders. Of course, I've been around a lot of pinheads too. But those extraordinary leaders always led. There's something consistent about them, and perhaps this is one of the things that I admire. They always led by a two-word moniker. 2 words. Follow me. They led from the front all the time. They didn't sit behind a desk, say, go do this, go do that, and then have an eclair. So, the guiding way, guiding through example. Lead from the front and lead by example. Firm yet fair. Be consistent, logical and natural consequences. If you have a pre-season meeting and you lay down the laws and everybody agrees to them, okay, are we all in agreement? Yes. Then if anybody transgresses, if anybody breaks one of those rules, it's not you being the bad guy. You were there. You were at the meeting. You signed on to this. How could you disrespect yourself and your team and the heritage and the uniform you see what I'm going? Yeah. And finally here, a little bit more on conscious leadership. If any of you have had my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Jeff Duke, then you would recognize this, leading with love, because that's that's Dr. Duke in a nutshell right there. If you've ever gotten a message from him, an email message at the bottom here where we all have our little saying, from promise to prominence or whatever else. Mine says expect her to tolerate. Anyway, Dr. Duke says, give them heaven. Not give them hell, give them heaven. So here he is, leading with love, and it seems that Dr. Lynch would agree. And this is just directly out. You could hear Dr. Duke saying this. I've heard him say this. It is less they care that what you know, it's more they know that you care. Anyway, once again, we started with compassion and modesty. Well, we're ending up here with the humble heart, with humility and synergy. Knowing that you are good and that you are in the process of pursuing mastery, so you're getting better. It's a process. You're on the journey. You are actively pursuing. You're pursuing mastery. And here, finally, big kiss goodbye. He says, try to walk the talk. This is simple. It's not easy. It's simple. It doesn't say it would be easy. These are 2 different concepts. It's very simple. You just do these things, but it's not easy because it's going to challenge you. Remember, your commitment will always be tested. You just try living these tenets. The encouraging part is they can be learned. So, okay, that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. And let's take a deep breath here, and we'll look forward to next week. Okay.